What's up, Met fans, and welcome back to Talking Mets with Rob. How is everybody doing on this Labor Day weekend, Monday, excuse me. Let me just fix one thing, and we'll be ready to go. Alrighty, guys. So, what underperforming performance by our New York Mets against the Washington Nationals. Hopefully, everybody can hear me loud and clear. And if you do, if you can't, please let me know in the comments. So, once again, guys, welcome to Talking Mets with Rob. Mets Talk Live. Unfortunately, this was supposed to be a live stream for the Mets versus Pirates, but the weather was not cooperating in Pittsburgh. And we are going to get a doubleheader on Wednesday, a split doubleheader for that matter. One game early afternoon, other game at night. I believe it was 1:35 and 6:35 is going to be the two games on Wednesday. So at the very least, the Braves, I believe, are off today as well, so we still remain one game in first place in the NL East. And for anybody, and I can see it with the polls that I put up there, the poll that I saw there. Unfortunately, too many Met fans, and the polls say it themselves, especially there was one on Twitter I posted, and there was one on the channel that I posted on this live stream, that a lot of people think that we're going to get either swept by the Pirates or lose the series to the Pirates. And for all we know, we can. And I think the problem with a lot of Met fans is the fact that they just automatically assume that the Mets lost the series to the Nationals and it's the end of the world, when there's a lot of things that factor into it. And the people who kept on saying the bullpen, it's not the bullpen. Ottavino has been one of our best pitchers, and I'm one of the guys who are very critical of Ottavino. He's been one of our best bullpen arms, and Buck trusts him enough to actually put him as the eighth inning guy. But here's the problem that I had with Buck Showalter and the bullpen, and that was on Saturday. On Saturday, after Ottavino gave up that home run, I know I was sitting in 515 with a lot of people. People were like, oh, here's Ottavino. We knew this was going to happen. No, you didn't. All right, he left a cookie slider that didn't slide. It was a cement mixer slider that if you're a single A player, you should be able to hit over the wall. And that's what happened. The ball was crushed. But here's the problem that I had on the side of the game. You had a 2-1 ball game going into the seventh inning? Yet you bring Adonis Medina in a one-run ball game. That makes absolutely no sense to me. And I know you say, oh, who are you going to bring in? Well, there was a couple of guys you could have brought in. And that was the bigger problem I had. You know, you could have brought in a couple of different relievers, but yeah, he decided to bring in Adonis Medina. And I didn't understand that at all. It was a one-run ball game. The Mets weren't hitting. I understand that. But at the very least, they should have just at least put in a competent bullpen arm. And as everybody, a lot of Met fans love Medina. He's a minor league pitcher. All right, that's what he's the AAA bullpen guy, and that's about it. The big problem that I have with Buck Showalter, and he showed it. He showed it a couple of times with continuing to throw up Vogelback in spots when you know he's not coming through. My God, again, taking two pitches right down the middle. What are you doing? And then he swings at one eye level. It makes no sense to me. And this goes back, again, to Billy Eppler. Now, Buck is doing what he can with the roster he gives, right? You gave him nothing at the deadline in the bullpen besides Givens. You gave him basically Dominic Smith and J.D. Davis all over again with Vogelback and Ruff. After the first week, they've been terrible, every one of them. And, everybody thought Ruff, after his sack fly, was going to break out of it. Well, he sucks too. And for the same people who talk, it's got to say, if I have to hear one more time about Vogelback's on-base percentage and slugging percentage, I might just go nuts. Because the whole point of that's why I kept saying JD Martinez, Trey Mancini, even if you wanted to talk about Josh Bell, who's struggling in San Diego, even if you want to talk about him, at least we know with JD Martinez, Josh Bell, and Trey Mancini, you can put them every day in a lineup against righties or lefties, and they'll perform well. I'm not saying one is batting 350 and the other one's batting 280. which would be great. But you have Vogelback, who is non-existent against lefties. As you saw in the Dodgers series, he never played because he can't hit lefties. And then you have Daniel Ruff, who, let's be honest, J.D. Davis is better than Daniel Ruff. And that's when you have to look at the whole point and why I did not want – that's why I didn't want it in the beginning of the year with J.D. Davis and at the time Cano. But when Cano was gone, J.D. Davis and Dominic Smith. You can't get on any type of run. You can't get in any type of groove. Have a platoon hitter at the DH spot. When you don't play the field and you don't play every day at the DH spot, the platoons don't work. It might work one game here, one game there, but throughout a season, it doesn't work. And it's glaring in the first month we have Darren Ruff and Daniel Vogelback. That's the problem. That's the bigger problem. And I don't want to talk about the bullpen. I honestly think the bullpen has been more than adequate. Honestly, let me ask you something. Look at the Braves bullpen against the Cardinals. You want to talk about a team that is just living and laying on their World Series trophy and not really paying attention about how bad their bullpen actually been? Do you know they had close games against the Marlins, close games against the Rockies, close games against the Cardinals? And when they play a good team and they have a close game, Minter couldn't get anybody out against the Cardinals. Did you see Kenley Jansen? The Braves should have lost that game in the ninth inning if it wasn't for the Marlins being terrible. If they think that Kenley Jansen is going to be the guy that gets into the top, they got another thing coming. And this has nothing to do with the Atlanta Braves possibly taking over first place. They possibly can by the end of the week. But again, even if the Braves take over, if the Mets by Friday are one game out of first place, guess what? We still got 23 games to go to pass them again. And it's funny to me how Met fans, as soon as something goes wrong, it's like, oh, collapse. The Mets haven't collapsed all year. And even if they lose the division, it's not a collapse. When you got the Braves, who have been playing 750 ball from June 1st, and the Mets playing 650 ball, that's not a collapse. You want to talk about 07 and 08? Those are collapses. Because one was 7 games with 17 to go. The other was just playing bad baseball in September. The Mets are not playing bad baseball. They're playing good baseball that I don't even think they're playing at their level. And the same people who are complaining about the Mets losing to the Nationals, they played the exact same way they played against the Dodgers, but we took 2 out of 3. So how can you balance that out? Well, number one, maybe the Dodgers aren't as good as everybody wants them to be or believes them to be, or the Nationals just got the Mets number. Which one is it? Because we can't just continue to say, we look at one series and be like, oh, and I do have to say one thing, and I want to say one thing about the Dodgers series and the National series. I do think the first time this year watching this Mets team in the National series, I think the first time this year, they got extremely confident in themselves when they beat the Dodgers and went into the National series thinking all they had to do was show up and they would win. That's the first time this year, game 133, 134, 135, against the Nationals, I honestly believe that day one went into the National series thinking that they can just show up and they'll win. And it bit them in the ass 2 days in a row. And I truly think that was the first time that happened. You know, we saw that after the 2 games against the Yankees at Citi Field. As soon as the Braves are coming to town, everybody thought, oh, they're going to get all high and mighty. They beat the Yankees and they're going to get rolled over by the Braves. Didn't happen. And for Buster Olney, and I know you guys watched it when the Braves were on ESPN, Buster Olney and everybody on ESPN who never talk about baseball until it's only when they actually show a live game. Buster Olney's like, the Braves took over the NL East. No, they didn't. And I don't care if a team is better on paper than the team that's in front of them. Doesn't matter. All that matters is the fact that when you go into a series, anybody can beat anybody. Whoever is the last wildcard team that makes the playoffs can beat the best team that's in the playoffs. That's baseball. That's why baseball is so great. That's why basketball is a waste of time. That's why football sometimes is a waste of time. That's why hockey is sometimes a waste of time. as a sport when it comes to when there's a great team. 9 out of 10 times, probably even better than that, 9.5 out of 10 times, a great team in those other sports usually don't lose to a bad team. In baseball, because it's a grind, because it's one of the longest seasons in sports, you're going to have a series like that. The same way the Dodgers can't beat the Pirates is the same reason why the Mets beat up on the Phillies. The logic doesn't make sense, right? Aren't the Dodgers way better than the Pirates? Aren't the Mets are better than the Phillies, but if you look at the record, 14-5 on the season against them, the Phillies aren't that far away from the Mets, like the Pirates are very far away from the Dodgers based on roster. And it's just that simple. And it's just the matter of it's a baseball series. That's all it was. It was the fact that there was a questionable decision by Buck Showalter bringing in Medina in a one-run ball game, which you could have, if you wanted to bring in Givens, you wanted to bring in Lugo, you wanted to bring in May, anybody who you're actually going to see on a postseason roster, I wanted to see in that ball game in the 7th inning. It was a 2-run ball game before Medina couldn't find the plate and started walking and giving up hits all over the place. That's the problem. That was the problem in that game. It wasn't about anybody except one pitch from Ottavino that made it 2-1. But the Mets were still in that ball game until Buck decided. I don't know if he was trying to save the bullpen. I don't know what he was doing. But Adonis Medina shouldn't have been in that ball game. You can kill the offense all you want. That's a problem in that game. They should have. You have to beat up on Corbin. You have to beat up on Fetty. There's no excuse for that. But when you make a questionable call on Saturday, where Medina came in besides any other bullpen arm that you could have had, anybody, I thought it was a really bad decision on Buck Showalter's part. And that's not even including what I continue to see with the additions of Ruff, Vogelback, and Naquin. Vogelback is an all-or-nothing hitter. I don't want to hear slugging percentage. I don't want to hear on-base percentage. The on-base percentage is 100% irrelevant when it comes to Daniel Vogelback. Because he can't run. Even if he had a healthy hamstring, he can't run. So it's pointless for the on-base percentage. Yeah, you might want that on-base percentage. If you're down by 1 run, you need somebody to get on base, and then you pinch run for Vogelback. But you're not putting Vogelback in that spot if you're down 2 runs and he's leading off. And it just makes no sense to me that the fact that, and I'm not saying Dominic Smith would be better at this point because I don't know. I honestly don't know. But I know Dominic Smith is swinging the bat. Dominic Smith struck out a lot, didn't do nothing, but he swung the bat at the very least. I had to watch on Saturday Daniel Vogelback looking at 2 pitches right down the middle that he could have crushed. And then takes 0-2 pitch. 2 pitches right down the middle. And then the third pitch, the one he actually swings at, is eye level. Makes no sense to me. Makes absolutely no sense. And Daniel Ruff is a bit. Look, here's what I would have done if I was Billy Eppler. If you're going to give up Holderman, J.D. Davis, and 3 lower-level minor leaguers for Daniel Vogelback and Daniel Ruff, that's 5 players. I would have rather you would have gave those 5 players and get a bullpen arm, a huge bullpen arm, like an Iglesias or a Chafin or something like that. If you're going to use it on these guys who, once again, I don't want to hear about slugging percentage. I don't want to hear about on-base percentage. I don't care that he crushes lefties. I don't care that he crushes righties. They're still 220 hitters in their career. That's not changing. If they were so good, I want to see them average-wise. I don't care about slugging percentage, average-wise. Because you know what? If Vogelback would have got a base hit in that spot, that would have helped us out in that inning. But he didn't. He didn't put the bat on the ball. That's why when I wanted a DH, I wanted a DH that could be in the lineup every single day. And that's not the case. It's just stupid at that point. It just makes no sense. And I don't know if Billy Eppler thinks that, Joey Lucchesi is coming back. Great. We're gonna put out prayers and hopes in Joey Lucchesi coming back from Tommy John. We're giving Tyler McGill all the hopes of him coming to the bullpen, who a guy who hasn't pitched since May. So 2 injured players, we're going to hope, is the answers to our bullpen woes, which, let's be honest, really hasn't been much of a problem. The games that we lost against the Braves in Atlanta, Carrasco and Walker, the Brave fans don't want to talk about that. I don't like excuses, but let's be honest. When Carrasco and Walker came out of the game, the first game and the second game, in the second inning, and we were using minor league arms, well, the Braves better win those games. Well, nobody likes to talk about that, but yet we weren't even full shit. We didn't even have our starters go past 2 innings, and it wasn't like the Braves were lighting them up. So it's not the pitching. It's the way they went about it at the trade deadline when I said 3 guys the Mets should be looking at the DH spot. And why is it nobody heard about Ruff or Vogelback until it actually happened, the trade? It was 3 or 4 days before the deadline that they got Vogelback and Ruff on the day of the deadline and Naquin. Why didn't we hear about them? Any rumors about them? You know why? Because nobody wanted them. You didn't need. I can guarantee you that the Giants would have gave you Ruff for 3 minor leaguers instead of JD Davis or just JD Davis. Like, it seemed like Eppler was reaching for a DH platoon that they did not need to reach for. And we're going to talk about the Padres. Can you make the playoffs first? Jeez. I mean, at least we know the Mets are making the playoffs. Like, I don't know if the Padres are going to make the playoffs the way they've been playing. And I don't see why the Mets would lose to the Padres. Again, the Padres had the Mets number this year, season-wise. But let's be honest. The Padres choke just as badly as the Mets do, and they can't get out of the first round either, the Padres. So let's not talk about the Padres. Then there's a Padres channel if you want to go on to there. They're probably not on right now, which those guys are actually really good at what they do. So it's not about, it's funny how the Mets will lose first round wild card to the Padres, but yet you'll be coming to Citi Field for 3 games. And that's the same team that chokes every year in the playoffs. At least when the Mets actually make the playoffs, they usually do a lot of damage in the playoffs, when they actually make it. But, for what the Padres did get in Hader and Soto and Bell and Drury, they looked a lot worse after the trade deadline than they did before. And I don't want to hear, they don't have Tatis, because I don't think that guy is worth a dime at this point, in my opinion. And it just shows that the clubhouse don't even like the guy. And that's the guy that you were hanging your hat on. I don't know, guys. I don't. The only person that scares me in that lineup in the Padres is Soto, because he's the one that always kills the Mets. So and that's the same Padres that couldn't beat that beat the Mets without DeGrom and Scherzer. So I'm not too worried about. Look, I don't care if it's the Padres. I don't care if it's the Cardinals. I don't care if it's the Braves or the Dodgers or whoever it is in the NLDS wild card or NLCS in the National League. It doesn't matter, because all that matters right now is that there is less than 30 games left in the season. I think it's 27 if I'm not mistaken. 27 games left. The Mets still have a chance. Oh, by the way, they're still in first place. The same people that think that the Mets are just going to, according to some people, the Mets are choking, which it's not true. I just don't know. And, everybody's like, oh, the Braves won the division last year. They won the World Series. Yeah, okay, but they got hot at the right time. That's the only reason why they won. If anybody was actually competent in the NL East, the Braves would have never won that division. They might have had to play a wild card game. They won 90 games last year, guys. I mean, let's not make like they were winning 100 games last year and they were the best team in baseball. They got hot at the right time. The right trades were made with Soler and Rosario and Duvall that put them over the top. And, for other people that talk about, oh, look what this team did, look what that team did, right? The Dodgers were the favorites to win the World Series last year, weren't they? Well, they got beat by the lowly Braves who killed 88 games. I mean, come on. If anybody was competent in the NL East, I truly think if DeGrom never got hurt, the Braves would have never won the NL East. Because even though I thought the Mets were flawed, extremely flawed last year, offensively, they were scoring 2.5 runs a ball game. I think they would have held off the Braves because I think the Mets were ready to go to probably had about 90 wins, 92 wins. And, well, Stuart, I don't agree. Vogelback is not okay. He's terrible. He had one good week in the last month and 10 days since we got him from right before the deadline. That's the bigger problem. But we could talk about that all we want. The team is the team. And the people who want to bring up Vientos now, great. If we bring him up and he bats 400 and he's one of the best players on this Mets lineup for the next month, great. Now we can't be on the postseason roster. So now you're going to get stuck with Daniel Ruff and Vogelback now. So I'd rather keep on using Vogelback and keep on using Ruff because those are the guys you're going to need in the playoffs. Vientos should have been up before September 1st. But once again, there's a reason why Mark Vientos is not getting brought up by the Mets. I'm telling you right now, I don't care if he's your 5th-ranked prospect. They don't like him as much as everybody seems that they do. All right? I've heard DeMayo. I heard anybody you could talk about in the Mets who follow the Mets, who write about the Mets, who are anybody that is anybody regards to the Mets prospects or whatever. They talk extremely highly of Mark Vientos. Well, and even the Mets, knowing that they screwed up at the deadline, saying, oh, if we don't get nobody, Mark Vientos could be our DH option. Well, where is he? Because you know what? Let me see what Vientos can do when there's a lefty on the mound and instead of Ruff. How about that? You know what? How about lighting a fire under their ass, bring Dominic Smith up, bring Vientos up, and replace them in the order. When there's a righty on the mound, bring in Dominic Smith. Maybe that lights a fire under their ass, under Vogelback's ass or Ruff's ass. How about that? It might not work, but at least they're trying. And it's just a huge problem. One of the bigger problems that I talked about at the deadline. If the Mets would have got one solid reliever, if that was Robinson, Chafin, Fulmer, Iglesias. Nobody knew Iglesias was available, but the Braves found a way to get him for basically nothing. Why couldn't the Mets do that? And I don't want to hear, it's nobody wanted to make a deal with the Mets because of Cohen. That's bullshit. I'm sorry. I don't believe that one bit. These owners, all they care about is the bottom line. The majority of them do. So if the Mets would have gave J.D. Davis and 3 lower-level minor leaguers to the Angels, you would have got Iglesias. Don't think for a second that was the case. You don't think the Cubs would have taken J.D. Davis and 3 lower-level minor leaguers for Robinson? They didn't even trade the guys that everybody thought they were trading. Happ was supposed to be gone. Contreras was supposed to be gone. They didn't do it. And this is what I talked about from day one. The Mets signed Billy Eppler to be their GM. Billy Epler's biggest problem with the Angels wasn't getting the big free agent name. That's not the issue. It was getting the back of the roster and the arms that are needed to make your team better. And that same now remember, all Eppler did was throw money at Scherzer. And the Mets already had everybody in their rotation. And he does make nice trades. I'll give him that. That Bassett trade was pretty good, but even though some people were pissed off because he gave up JT Ginn, which, he talked about, I didn't want to give none of my we held on to our 19 top prospects. But yet you gave JT Ginn, who was your number 5 at the time prospect, for Chris Bassett, which was, let's be considerate, it might be a good trade for Oakland and it might be a good trade for the Mets. It's already been a good trade for the Mets. But we're so concerned about prospect hugging, and that's exactly what Billy Eppler did, except when he got Daniel Ruff, which nobody wants to talk about, right? And I'm not even mad about the Vogelback Holdeman deal. I'm not that concerned. I wasn't mad about that, even though at the time Holdeman was pitching pretty well for the Mets. I understand why Billy Eppler was like, you know what? He was available. He's supposedly a masher against right-handers. Fine. I had no problem with that deal. I wouldn't kill him if Vogelback was the option and he would have brought up Mark Vientos or tried it with J.D. Davis still. I would have been okay with that. and went out and get more bullpen arms. But he used 6 players for Naquin, Vogelback, and Ruff. How about using those 5 players instead of Ruff, or maybe even 3 players? How about the deal you gave to the Giants for Ruff to get a bullpen arm? You tell me the Tigers wouldn't have gave you Chafin for that much, or Fulmer, or the Cubs wouldn't have took that for Robinson? That's insane to me. Or the Angels would have took that about Iglesias. That's the bigger problem. No, and it's not the point of the bullpen's the problem. A lot of people are going to talk about that because people are afraid to talk about the offense and how preached they've been. You can't just always go back to the bullpen. And then people were talking about the bullpen in the series. Buck brought in Adonis Medina in a 1-run ball game in the 7th inning in Game 2 against the Nationals. That's not supposed to happen. That's on Buck. Now, you want to say the Mets should have scored 5 runs against Corbin? Fine. But you know what? They should have still won that ball game considering the fact that where was Lugo? Where was May? Where was Rodriguez? Where was anybody who was actually capable of throwing a ball over the plate? That was the bigger problem in that game. Yesterday's game was just a disaster from the start. I don't think if anybody felt comfortable about that game yesterday. I was watching that game. As soon as the game started, it just didn't feel right. And then you threw out Carrasco, who was what made me even more mad about Saturday's game was the fact that Carrasco was not going to go probably more than 5 innings because he's just coming back from injury. And oh, by the way, I have a little conspiracy theory about why Carrasco is back so fast. And I'll tell you that in a second. Why wouldn't you save Medina or whoever else that should be in the major leagues for yesterday's game, where Carrasco wasn't going long in that game? Why would you not use your better arms in your bullpen for Saturday and save Medina if Carrasco happens to come out in the 5th inning and just put him in the 6th inning? Or, put him in the 6th inning after Carrasco was out. And let's go back to Saturday for 1 second. On Saturday, they used Tommy Hunter for 1 inning. A guy who's considered one of your long guys who can go 2 innings. Why didn't he go 2 more innings instead of going 1 inning with Tommy Hunter? Why only went 1 inning with Tommy Hunter and then went to what's his name? Ottavino. Why didn't he go 2 innings, stretch out the bullpen? If you were so concerned about using all your bullpen in that game on Saturday, why didn't you just use Tommy Hunter for 2 innings, who's pitched well, and then go to Ottavino? Again, Ottavino could have gave up the home run in the 8th inning. But the point is, you still had enough arms in the bullpen to not use Adonis Medina and Oka as the 2 guys that came in. That was a problem. That's stupid. And let's go to Carrasco and my wonderful conspiracy theory. Carlos Carrasco has a vested option. He has to pitch a certain amount of innings to vest his option for the Mets for next year. Why did nobody talk about the fact that this was supposed to be, with his injury, 3-week injury, right? 2 to 3 week injury. It wasn't even 10 days, and he's back. Without a rehab start. Oh, by the way. There's only maybe 3, maybe 4 starts for Carrasco left. I think that Carrasco is still hurt, and he came back so he can reach his innings limit to vest his option for next year. That's my opinion. That's my conspiracy theory. And if a player says, I'm okay, I'm ready to go, with the MLB Players Union, a team just can't say, oh, well, we can't put you in, you're not ready yet. They're not going to do that. They don't want problems with the MLBPA. So my conspiracy theory when it comes to Carlos Carrasco is he has a vested option for next year for the amount of innings he throws that automatically gives him a contract for next year with the vested option. I think because Carlos Carrasco did not look comfortable on that mound yesterday. And his pitches didn't look as sharp. And for an injury that he had that should go about 3 weeks and no rehab start. Like, don't you think a guy who injured himself, and it's not a 25-year-old injuring himself with that type of injury, 33, 34-year-old guy. Why wouldn't you throw him for one rehab start and just throw Trevor Williams in that game yesterday? Instead of using Trevor Williams when you did, why didn't you just use Trevor Williams for that game, who's pitched well every opportunity you gave him, and give Carrasco a rehab start, making sure he's 100%, making sure he's okay? Because I think Carrasco and his agent were like, listen, I'm good. Let's go. Because he knows that if he didn't start yesterday, there is no possible way he was going to get to his innings that he has to get to vest his option for next year. So now, again, he might have been good enough to pitch, but not to the level where he can be the Carrasco we've seen in the first couple of months of the year. Well, that's a problem. That's the problem that I have. And like I said, starting that national series, I think the Mets got well ahead of themselves after they beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3. I think they were so good that they could just walk in, put on their Mets jersey, walk onto the field, and the Nationals would say, "Oh, mighty Mets, we will give you 3 wins." No, that's not how baseball works. And that was the first time this year that I saw the Mets go into a series, knowing that they're better than a team, and played like they were going to win no matter what. And you know what? I think that game on Saturday, that Patrick Corbin game, completely caught them by surprise and completely messed up what they were supposed to do, like they were doing all year long. And that was just playing baseball, playing the way you've been playing all year. This series, they clearly thought they can walk onto the field and just win a ball game. And I think Buck noticed that because Buck did not look happy. And Buck probably gave it to him after the game yesterday. And honestly, today's rain delay is probably going to help this Mets team for all the nagging injuries that we have. It's going to save our bullpen. Now we're going to have the bullpen ready to go for this Pittsburgh series in Pittsburgh. For everybody who thinks that the Pittsburgh Pirates are a bad team, they got a lot of the good young players on there. I can assure you, Holdeman, and Pittsburgh is going to throw in Holdeman as many times as they can so he can pitch well against the Mets. Like, it's just that simple. I can assure you the Dodgers didn't want to use Jake Reed in a big spot, but they knew, Jake Reed, he's pissed off about the Mets DFAing him. Let's throw him in there. Perfect. Well, Ken, I honestly think, and you know what? Let's hope it helps Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor to get a day off again. This was, what I like about this day off is that it wasn't a scheduled off day. And that's why I think in layman's terms, basically, it's like a game day and Pete Alonso and Lindor is off. So I think that's going to help them. I think it's needed. It's clear that Pete Alonso was tired. Lindor looked tired. And the team honestly looked tired, honestly. I'm not making excuses for them at all. And I said the reason why. I think they got way too confident going into this series, and that's the wrong way to go about it. And I'm giving a ton of credit to the Nationals because they saw they saw blood. That's basically what happened. They were like sharks circling, and they saw blood. It's very simple. Roberto, I would say Showalter lost Saturday's game more than he lost yesterday's game. I thought after Saturday's loss, I don't think there was any hope for the Mets to win that game yesterday. Honestly, in my opinion, and it's not the fact that the Mets just played bad. It was just the fact that, and I don't know if you heard this, Roberto, what I just said about Carlos Carrasco's vesting option. I think Carlos Carrasco came back too early, and I think he went to the Mets and said, "I'm fine." And the reason why he did that is because he knows if he would have missed his start yesterday, there was no way he was going to make his innings that he needed to make the vest his option for next year. That's why Carlos Carrasco pitched yesterday. And that's my conspiracy theory. You can call it whatever you want. I think that's the reason why Carrasco pitched yesterday. Not because he was 100% healthy, because he knew that going out there wouldn't hurt him more physically, but he wasn't 100% on that mound. He looked uncomfortable. His pitches weren't sharp. He clearly was still, I wouldn't say feeling pain, but he was still probably uncomfortable on the mound. If you want to call it discomfort, he felt discomfort, maybe that. But I think it was more about the vesting option yesterday than it was about throwing a guy out there that you know can give you at least 5 innings and a couple of runs. And you could have used Trevor Williams yesterday to start that game. There would have been no problem. Stewart, that's fine, but you're in a division race here. You can't play games with that. And it's the Mets' call not to do it. You could have said, Carrasco, let's just give you another day. And look, the reason why I talk about the vesting option, because anytime a guy is injured and it wasn't like it was a blister, all right? I believe it was an oblique for Carrasco. Why is it Scherzer was 6-7 weeks, but Carrasco was only less than 10 days? Like, I just don't understand that. It made no sense to me. Even though it was a strain, wouldn't you want him, who hasn't pitched in almost 2 weeks, bring him down for a rehab start so to make sure that he can get through a game fine and he looks sharp? You're throwing him out there. I don't care if it's the Nationals or not. You're throwing him out there, a guy who hasn't pitched in 2 weeks, and you expect his pitches to be sharp. That doesn't make sense. They dropped the ball in that game yesterday because of the fact that Carrasco shouldn't have been pitching in that game. Now, not saying Trevor Williams is going to be lights out, but he's been good for us. You know, they threw Trevor Williams against the Philadelphia Phillies in Philly, and he pitched great. So what was the point of that? I honestly think that Carrasco went to the Mets saying, I'm good, I'm ready to go, I'm on a pitch. And what were the Mets going to do? Take an MRI and see there was only a little bit of inflammation? If he says he's fine, what are you supposed to do? You can't just, not pitch him. And then on top of that, you don't even put him on the IL, so you can't even bring up an extra pitcher. That's the other thing that annoys me. That, Walker came back quicker than usual. And the same thing with Walker. Even though I don't think Walker was only a couple of days past his start. So why he pitched against the Yankees and DeGrom didn't? It's crazy to me that they don't put these guys on IL. Like Escobar, they didn't put on the IL right away. So he couldn't bat left-handed. So you threw him against a right-hander and throw him up right-handed, which made no sense to me. It makes no sense. And they're so scared to put these guys on the IL. Like, they put Escobar on the IL a week after he was already hurt. That don't make no sense. Yeah, you can backtrack it a few days, but not that long. And the same thing with Guillermo. They didn't put Guillermo until after Escobar went in on the IL. And then you brought up Beatty. Okay, fine. And then you brought up, Moreno for 3 games in the Philly series. Yet Viento's still nowhere to be found. So I don't know the logic of not putting these guys on the IL. So you basically having a rotation that was bare. You had a roster that you couldn't use these guys in most situations, and they're just sitting on the bench. Another reason why a platoon at the age doesn't work, because you can't put these guys up. Like Vogelback, each time he came up in that Dodger series, he was cold. It's a guy who hasn't played in 5 days, coming up in a Dodger series, and not that he swings the bat anyway, but you're expecting a guy who's cold off the bench with a bad hamstring, where you need a home run in that spot to hit a home run. That's questionable decisions. And I know, look, Buck Showalter's he has his roster. Other than Saturday, I can't question Buck about yesterday because that seemed like more of a Carrasco call than anything else. If he says you're fine, well, Carrasco's your number 4 starter. I mean, you're going to throw him out there. You're just going to. If he says he's fine, what are you going to do? Tell him no? You don't know how he feels. Nobody else does. So the Mets' hands were tied when Carrasco says, I'm ready to go. So the only thing that I question the Mets, and that's more Billy Eppler in the front office, telling Carrasco, go down to a minor league start, pitch 5 innings, then come back for your next start. But they didn't do that. That's not on Buck Showalter. Buck Showalter's problem was Saturday in a one-run poker bringing Adonis Medina in. Just because Medina did a really good job against the Dodgers in LA 2 months ago, 3 months ago at this point, doesn't mean that you throw Adonis Medina in a one-run ball game against the Nationals, who was a AAA player. So you're throwing a AAA pitcher against a AAA lineup. Well, there's a pretty good chance that he might not do well. And there's a chance that he might strike out the side. You just don't know. But the latter happened. But that's okay. Because going into the series against the Pirates, there's no question. If the Mets play the way they're supposed to, the way they played Mets baseball like they have all year, they should have no problem beating the Pirates. But why baseball is so great, why we love baseball so much, is that anything can happen on any given day. And they got that kid O'Neal Cruz who scares the living daylights out of me. That kid is so freaking good. Don't hit the ball to him. And you know what? Walk him. Give him the Barry Bonds treatment. Because that's one guy in the lineup you can't let beat you. Because that kid is so good. And you know what? That's what you worry about when you got a struggling Mets team, which I wouldn't call it struggling. I just think that the Mets went in. Now, I don't think the Mets are going to go into the Pirates series like they did going into the National Series. The reason why I say that is because I think, even though it was wonderful beating the Dodgers 2 out of 3, I think the Mets got way too cocky and way too confident in themselves, thinking they could walk onto that field against the Nationals and they would just win no matter what they brought to the table. Buck Showalter, as mad as he looked, and I think if Buck Showalter on Saturday could do it over, I don't think he would have put Medina in that ballgame. But what I do like is that I seen a different Buck in a good way, considering the fact that I know Buck thought that Saturday was a mistake. And, you know, he don't have to admit it, but he's not stupid. He knows he made a mistake there. Sunday, it was more of a Carrasco saying he was okay than the Mets issue. But I can guarantee you, in that locker room on Sunday after that Nationals game, Buck was like, listen, we thought we can walk onto that field and just win a ball game just because the Nationals are bad. That shit ain't happening in Pittsburgh. And I truly believe that you're going to see a Mets team that is going to go ball to the wall in this Pittsburgh series. They're not going to let up. And I truly believe that. And because I think even the Mets players realized that they took it easy and just thought they can walk on the field, put on a Met jersey, and win a ball game just because they're the 85 at the time, 85 and 49 New York Mets, and the Nationals are a joke. Well, guess what? There's, you know, and when people talk about, especially in September, when the Mets got the easiest schedule in baseball, you know, these are when the bad teams bring up all their top prospects. You know, and people forget about that. You know, those are top prospects that want to show that they belong in the big leagues. This isn't, you know, the middle of July when the bad teams are just the bad teams in the bad roster, where their top prospects are not there yet. You're bringing bad teams with their top prospects. These are kids that have all the hype in the world and want to show what they can do. And that's the problem with September bad teams, because you're going to see their top prospects most likely in a series. But with that said, Mr. Met is telling you the Mets are 85 and 50, 35 games over 500. They are still, and let me make this clear. Let me check the mic. The mic is on. The Mets are still in first place, if everybody forgot that. Right? The Mets are still in first place in the NL East. The Mets have been in first place all year, when in May, the Braves are supposed to take over first place. In June, after the West Coast trip, the Braves are supposed to take over first place. In July, the Mets were supposed to lose first place to the Braves. In August, the Mets were supposed to be out of first place, and the Braves are supposed to take over. It is now September 5th, and the Braves still are not in first place. So until the Braves end up being, and I'm not talking about being tied for first place, because they were a half a game behind the Mets at one point, and then it went to 2 games and 3 games and 4 games. Yes, it went back down to 1 game, but the Mets are still in first place, guys. We have to remember that. They are still one of the best teams in baseball. And as good as the Braves have been, playing at a 750 clip, the Mets are still in first place. So give a little credit to the Mets, even though I know ESPN and the Braves fans and Yankee fans are non-existent since the Yankees have been playing terrible. But for whatever the Braves fan says, and I went after them on Twitter because they act like they're in first place when they're not, and they're using last year's championship as a recipe for this year, which makes no sense because it doesn't matter about last year. You know what? If the Mets didn't fall apart and DeGrom didn't get hurt last year, the Braves would have never won the division. And that's a fact. As bad as the Mets offense was last year, the Braves won 88 games. I think if DeGrom was healthy, the Mets would have won the division. So it took the Braves to win a division when the Mets lost their ace pitcher and didn't have nobody else in their rotation. And the Mets continued to score no runs last year. But why do we act like the Braves won 100 games? Because they didn't last year. Now, you could say they're a better team this year. Yeah, I would think so because they're clearly going to win over 88 games. But this is the same team that needed the Mets to fall apart with their injuries. And that's what happened. And the NL East last year was terrible last year. At least the Phillies and the Mets are actually really good this year. And you know what? They can continue to play narco all they want in Atlanta. They can do that all they want. And they can make fun of narco and whatever they want to do. And that's cute. They can do that. But you know what? They only still won one series against the Mets this year. And that was when Carrasco and Taijuan Walker left in the second inning of both of those games. And it's funny, they control the Mets all they want, but they control the Mets, but they're still trolling the Mets in second place. And they're still in second place. And until the Braves are a half a game better than the Mets in the division, and even if the Braves are a game over the Mets in the division by Friday, that doesn't mean the Mets aren't going to win the division. Just because the Braves might take the division on September 10th doesn't mean it's September 15th the Mets are not back in first place. You know, everybody forgets. You know, the Braves fans like to say, oh, we got 3 games in October at the end of the month against you guys. The last 3 games against each other. Okay, the Mets can say the same thing. So if we're only 1 game out of first place and we're playing the Braves 3 times, why can't the Mets sweep you? Why can't the Mets take 2 out of 3? So before anybody talks about that, and just remember, the Braves have to be 1 game better than the Mets at the end of the season. If the Mets take 1 game in that 3-game series at the end of the year, they win the season series. So technically the Mets are 2 games ahead of the Braves, because of the fact that the Mets only need to win 1 game. If it comes to a tiebreaker, the Mets have the season series. So the Braves have to be 2 games better than the Mets for the entire year if it remains around this close of a division race. And let them keep playing narco. Let them keep playing and trolling the Mets fans and trolling the Mets, because when they lost to the Cardinals, I didn't hear the Braves fans on Twitter or on my channel. I didn't hear. Let's not talk about Strider. He pitched against the Colorado Rockies in Atlanta. Let's relax with that. You know, Strider's the same guy that couldn't get out of the 5th inning against the Mets in Atlanta, oh, by the way, and actually do well. So, like, Strider he's a big baby. And if you look at his stats, he pitches well against bad teams. So let's be honest about that. He finally pitched well against the Mets in Atlanta. Like, let's relax. Well, why wouldn't the Mets feel confident that they can beat anybody in the playoffs? And I agree with you. I don't think it matters who wins the division in the NL East, because the Braves will do well in October. And even if the Mets win or lose the division, they're going to be the number 1 wildcard team as well. And they got 3 games at home in the wildcard series. The Braves are an extremely good team. And I don't know how long you've been in the stream, or how long you've been hanging on in this channel for. But I've always said, I never said once the Braves are a bad team. Never, never, never. I never say that. Everybody should turn off the channel if I said that. But what I don't like what Braves fans do, and they give no credit to the Mets. when the Mets have been one of the best teams in baseball. And as good as the Braves have been, they did not take over the NL East yet. They haven't. But that means nothing in October. You guys won 88 games last year. You won the World Series. Why was that? Because you got hot at the right time, not because you were the best team going into the playoffs. Absolutely not. It was the fact that the Braves got hot at the right time. You know, for all I know, if the Mets still win the division, you don't think the Braves are going to be one of the scariest teams in that National League? Absolutely. You know, just because the Braves don't win the division doesn't mean they're going to fall apart. No, absolutely not. That's crazy. If anybody thinks that, they're insane. But if the Mets, here's the thing that I think can derail the Dodgers. If the Mets win the division, again, nobody knows. The Mets win the division, just because the road looks a little bit easier for the Mets to get to the World Series, doesn't mean, or the NLCS, doesn't mean the Braves can't knock off the Dodgers. Because if the Mets win the division, the Braves are going to see the Dodgers in the National League Division Series because of the way the seeding lines up. You know, the Braves would have to play. Who would they play? What was it? The Padres? Or not? I'm sorry, the Phillies. They would play the Phillies. The Braves would demolish the Phillies, and we'll see the Mets in the NL. The Braves will face the Dodgers in the NLDS because the Dodgers would be waiting for them. So, and I think the Braves are better than the Dodgers, in my opinion. I saw the Dodgers, and after their top four in that lineup, they're not that good. And their rotation that Dodger fans want to go crazy about, if they're going to lean on Clayton Kershaw as their ace, well, you got problems. Yeah, the Braves are going to – let's hope Soroka comes back because let's be honest. I'm one of those guys that I don't like to see injuries on any team. Like, I'd rather play a team – look, nobody wants to – look, I think Braves fans would say, well, I hope Alonso is not in the lineup because he's injured, not because they want to see him injured, but they don't want to see Alonso in the Mets lineup. Of course. Would I rather see Mike Soroka not in the rotation? Absolutely. But I want to see a team full strength. I've always said that. I think it's fun, and I think it's the best way to play a team because you really know who's the better team at that point in time. Now, Mike Soroka's got to stay healthy. I mean, he tore his Achilles the second time walking in the clubhouse. Like, you know, what happens when he jumps off the mound covering first base? To say that might not happen again, God forbid, because you don't want to see that. You don't want to see an injury like that. And it was unfortunate because Mike Soroka first time got hurt when pitching against the Mets. And you saw his Achilles just snap, which is a scary sight to see. But just because Soroka comes back doesn't mean the Braves are going to be winning the World Series again. They done it without Soroka. And also, they did it without Acuna, which I honestly believe, guys, and I don't know how many Braves fans are here, but I think Acuna is hurting your team, to be honest with you, because he talked about his knee being a problem still. I think he's actually hurting you, and that goes for the outfield as well. When they played the Mets, and the Mets were hitting balls in the gap in right center, he couldn't cut any ball off. That's scary. You know, I hope Acuna is okay. I hope he don't hurt himself, but I think Acuna is actually hurting your team. You know, you're not winning because of Acuna. You're winning because the amazing play by Riley, the amazing play by Swanson, the amazing play by Travis d'Arnaud. And I honestly, look, I can't be the one to sit here and look, I tell my fans every time, especially after the Dodgers series, you can be confident, but do not be cocky because there's no reason for it. And I go through that motto every day with myself. You know, I was ecstatic the Mets beat the Dodgers 2 out of 3. But I was already talking about tomorrow against the Nationals. Because I'm looking, look, I'm not here saying, even when the Mets were facing the Yankees, it wasn't about, let's be the talk of the town because we beat the Yankees. I didn't give two shits about the Yankees. I wanted to beat the Yankees because that means that the Braves can't gain a game on us. That's all I cared about. I was more concerned about watching the scoreboard, seeing what the Braves are doing at Yankee Stadium when I was there against the Mets. and looking at who has the back pages in New York. You know when I want the back pages in New York? When the Mets are hoisting that championship trophy. Other than that, I don't give two shits about the back pages. Yeah, it was cool with Beatty hit the home run against the Braves, and yeah, I bought the newspaper to get the back page for Beatty, but that's our top prospect. That's why I bought the paper, because I want to put it in a frame, because I like to do that stuff. I agree, and more. That's why the Braves are one of the best organizations front office wise, because they're not afraid to bring up Grissom and Michael and Harris. Excuse me, because they do that. They're not afraid to bring up those guys. Look, when the Braves brought up Riley was terrible when they first brought him up. But you know what? They made him go through the bumps in the road, and look what he turned into. The same thing with Grissom and Harris. They might go into the playoff and might be terrible for you guys. But you think the Braves are going to be like, oh, these guys got to go back to the minors? Absolutely not. They'll be in the starting lineup in 2023. That's why I love the Braves organization when it comes to the front office, because of that. Because what the Mets did, or should I say didn't do, when they needed that offensive bat, when Vientos was lighting it up, they still didn't bring him up. They brought up Brett Beatty because they had no other choice. They had nobody else. Both of their third basemen were on the IL. They had to bring up Brett Beatty. It wasn't because they felt like they needed a spark, which should have been done anyway. They brought up Brett Beatty because it was an emergency situation. And even if you want to talk about Alvarez, which I still don't was a pipe dream, I think if the Braves had a top prospect that was a catcher and Darno wasn't doing it, they would have brought up a catcher, even though it wouldn't have. It might have hurt the rotation a little bit, because you never know how a rookie catcher is going to perform with a pitching staff, but they would have brought him up. And that's the problem that I have with the Mets. And this goes way back. This doesn't just go with Billy Eppler. This is the organizational thing with the Mets. It took Pete Alonso having a outrageously great spring training in 2019 to just give a sniff of Pete Alonso starting the season with the Mets. That's a problem, because when the Mets in the early parts of July needed a bat, a spark, something from that DH spot, Beatty was nowhere to be found. Vientos was nowhere to be found. We were bringing up Nick Plummer, out of all people, to help out, even though he had a couple of big hits, but other than that, he was terrible. And now, with Daniel Ruff being absolute zero, Vientos is still in the minor leagues. So what I love about the Braves organization is that they're not afraid, even in a pennant race or in a division race. They still brought up Grissom. They still brought up Harris, who at the time, I think Harris was a huge spark plug to that Braves team that needed it badly. Because let's be honest, if the Braves didn't bring up Harris because they saw they needed something, who knows where the Braves would be at this point? Now, they'd still be a really good team, but would they be as good as they are right now? Who knows? But what did the GM and the front office of the Braves have? They got the pulse of their team. They knew the Braves needed something. It was too early for the trade, any type of trade. So what did they do? They dig into their farm system. Michael Harris playing really well in Double-A. It wasn't even Triple-A for that matter. Double-A. And they brought the kid up. And he's absolutely amazing. Really good. And he's going to be your center fielder for the next 10 to 12 years probably. I mean, for the Mets' sake, I hope he's not like an Andrew Jones. Let's hope not, for my sake. And Grissom, he struggled a little bit. The Braves could have easily sent him back down to the minor leagues, but they didn't, because they give the kid time. And the Mets don't do that. And that doesn't mean the Mets can't win a World Series despite that. They can. Of course they can. If you got DeGrom and Scherzer at the top of your rotation, you can beat anybody. That's easy. Anybody can beat anybody in the playoff. Whoever is the last wild card team in baseball, say it might be the Padres. Maybe the Padres win it all. I doubt it, but it's possible. That's why the Major League Baseball playoffs are so great. That's why the NHL playoffs get so much attention, because anybody who makes the playoffs can win a World Series. Anybody can win a Stanley Cup in hockey. if you make the playoffs. And that's why baseball is so great, because in the last 10 years, it hasn't always been the great team. The two best teams that were projected to make the World Series the last couple of years was the Yankees and Dodgers. How many times did that happen? Both of them didn't make it, except the Dodgers once. So before everybody goes crazy about the Braves might be a better team, the Mets might be a better team, it doesn't matter in October, or in this case, late October. It doesn't, because it comes at who performed at the right time. We all talk about, oh, well, the Mets don't have a lot of experienced guys going into the playoffs. Well, why do we assume that Harris and Grissom is going to be good in the playoffs? They might be a little bit, the spotlight might be a little bit too big for them. We don't know that. Alonso might be garbage in the postseason. We don't know that. But I honestly do think, it hasn't been the Mets pitching that's been the problem. And let me just go that for 1 second, because I saw Hebrew write that. It's been the offense. And we've seen this offense, and this is another reason why I don't like a platoon, and why I wanted a guy who is a capable bat at DH, who provides power but is also hits for average at the DH spot. Because when you got a team like the Mets, who is a small ball, productive outs, base hit, line drive type of team, when you got 2 or 3 guys that are not performing and you don't hit home runs, or at least enough of them, you get what you got in the National Series. And we've seen this all year with this team. Not saying, they're a bad offensive team, because they're not. But when you need that 2 or 3, like the other day, when Vogelback came up, right? We needed that 2-run home run, because the Mets weren't getting 2, 3, 4 base hits in a row to score some runs. We needed that home run. We didn't get it. And not saying that Trey Mancini, JD Martinez, Josh Bell would have been any better. We don't know that, obviously. But I'd rather have a 260 hitter or a 270 hitter at the DH spot, knowing when if you can't hit a home run, to get on base. Because Vogelback and Daniel Ruff are basically a strikeout or nothing, basically. If he don't hit a home run, they're not doing anything. And that's why I like Trey Mancini. I thought it was going to happen. I thought that was when JD Martinez wasn't an option anymore. Trey Mancini was the option. He's doing very well for the Astros, because he's not a 220 hitter. He's a 260 hitter, 270 hitter, who has a little bit of pop. The Mets didn't necessarily need a power hitter. We have that. Vogelback is a power hitter, but that's all he is. He's a strikeout guy who's a power hitter, but he hasn't hit a home run since what? When was the last home run? 2 weeks ago against the Yankees? I mean, come on. And that's the bigger problem that I have with why I think the trade deadline was a complete disaster. Because you saw a platoon with J.D. Davis and Dominic Smith work. For whatever reason you think that did they succeed, if you didn't think Dominic Smith's a good ball player, if you didn't think J.D. Davis is a hitter, whatever you thought, if one of them got hot, and this is the same thing with Vogelback and Ruff, if Dominic Smith all of a sudden got hot in June, and he was one of the hottest hitters in the lineup, but tomorrow there's a lefty in the game, J.D. Davis would get the start, because that's what you have as a platoon, right? That's what analytics says, and that's what Buck has been doing, right? So you were going to get a hot hitter in Dominic Smith out of the lineup because there's a lefty on the mound and you want J.D. Davis to get a spot. So you're bringing in a J.D. Davis who hasn't played in 5 days because Dominic Smith has been so hot, throwing him in the lineup cold because there's a lefty on the mound. And what do you expect him to go 2 for 3 with 2 home runs? No, it usually doesn't happen. Baseball is not just about a gut feeling. Baseball is actually, that's why analytics, I think, it hurts this game so much, because it's not about going with the hot hand. It's about, whoa, there's a lefty on the mound. How can we put Dominic Smith in there, who's been 13 out of their last 16 with 3 home runs and 7 RBIs? That's the problem. The same problem is popping their ugly head right now with another platoon, with an all-or-nothing type of platoon. Dominic Smith and J.D. Davis, at the very least, they weren't all or nothing. At least J.D. Davis and Dominic Smith were swinging and missing. At least they were trying to hit the ball. Daniel Ruff and Vogelback, they just sit there looking at pitches like, oh, strike, strike, strike. Well, Ken, I do think Buck is above analytics, but when you got Billy Eppler chirping on your ear, hey, I traded Vogelback and I traded for Ruff. These guys got to be in the lineup. And you saw what happened in the National Series, right? When all of a sudden Ruff or Vogelback wasn't batting fifth all of a sudden, right? You know, I honestly think that Trey Mancini was the guy to get after JD Martinez. The Red Sox weren't trading him. Trey Mancini was the guy because I'd rather have a 260, 270 hitter with some pop than a guy who bats 220 who, let's be honest, when Vogelback, when he was on other teams and when Ruff was on the Giants, you don't think those teams are putting Vogelback against righties? You don't think Ruff was only getting put against lefties? Of course they were. Why were they still batting 220? Because guess what? They're all or nothing hitters. They're not a gap-to-gap hitter. They're not a doubles machine. They're not a singles hitter. They're a home run or nothing type of guy. That's why those trades make no sense. Now, if you wanted to get Vogelback and it was only Vogelback and you wanted to keep J.D. Davis, fine. All right. I could have seen that. But you gave up too much for Ruff, who's a guy who can only hit lefties. And when he actually got a base hit, it was against a righty when it was too early in the game to pitch hit Vogelback. And Trey Mancini was perfect for this Mets team. You could put him in against lefties. You could put him in against righties. You know, what does that tell you that Daniel Ruff can only hit left-handers when the majority of the time, 90% of the time, you see right-handed pitching? That tells you he's not a good hitter. Just because his slugging percentage is the same thing as Pete Alonso or Mike Trout, as someone said on the chat a couple of days ago. Same thing with Vogelback. That's the problem. Guys, that's the problem. And I think, you know, I can assure you, look, does anybody remember what the Astros gave up for Trey Mancini? No, because it was nothing. Why couldn't the Mets do that? Because Eppler wanted to hold us to his 19th top prospect, which probably won't see the majors anyway. And if they did, it's probably garbage. Come on. Paris, 100%. When Cano was DFA'd by the Mets decided who they wanted to be the DH, Dominic Smith or J.D. Davis. Anybody with a brain in their head could tell you, if you play a guy every day, if you would have gave Dominic Smith 2 weeks to play every day against lefties and righties, you would know if this guy's a good hitter because you gave him 30 to 40 at-bats in a row, seeing what he can do. The same thing with J.D. Davis. If you throw him in there for 2 weeks straight, 30 to 40 at-bats, 2 weeks straight, lefties and righties, see what he can do. And I still think to this day, J.D. Davis in 2019 was a 285 hitter, 20 home runs, can knock in 80 RBIs. He was the guy that I wanted in the DH spot every single day. People keep on forgetting about J.D. Davis, that he had a wrist injury in 2021 that even the doctors said was going to take a while in this season to get him back to 100%. So he was still with a nagging wrist injury, still hitting better than Dominic Smith. So what does that tell you? Did the Mets screw up on J.D. Davis? I still think so. Because he is actually performing pretty well in San Francisco. I think if they would have kept J.D. Davis in the DH spot, he would have done a lot more than Daniel Vogelback, would have done a lot more than Danny Ruff, and damn sure did a lot more than Dominic Smith. That's my opinion when it comes to J.D. Davis. Not saying that J.D. Davis would have been the difference maker in this lineup, but I think he would have done a lot better if you gave this kid an opportunity every single day. Just my opinion. Because platoons don't like, if you want a platoon, Guillorme and Escobar, I understand that. They're both, Escobar struggled, but Guillermo still gives you a good, solid at-bat every time. But at DH, when a guy is sitting on the bench the majority of the game, platoons don't work. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. Because like I was telling the guy Yippee, who kept on saying that Vogelback has the same slugging percentage as Mike Trout and Pete Alonso, which is freaking hilarious to me. Because if he was as good as those guys, or at least somewhat as good as those guys, they would be playing every day. He's not. Platoons don't work. And I said this last week. If Vogelback is 10 for 10 in his last 2 games or 3 games, he has 6 RBIs with 3 home runs. But there's a lefty on the mound the next day. Guess who's getting a start? Daniel Ruff. If Vogelback was as hot as anybody in the lineup before the Dodgers series, and the Dodgers threw 3 lefties, Daniel Ruff would have been in the lineup just like he was all 3 of those games against the lefties and not Vogelback. That's a problem. That's why platoons don't work at the DH. Why do you think in the American League, when before the DH was in the National League, why David Ortiz was always the DH? Why the American League, you always saw them have a consistent DH? Because that's how you go about using the DH. You don't go about using the platoon as a DH. You want a platoon on the field in a lineup? Fine. You want to have Escobar and Guillermo when there's a lefty on the mound? Throw Escobar. When they're right on the mound, Guillermo? Fine. Because they're actually playing the game. They're playing defense as well. When a guy who is only a DH, which Ruff and Vogelback are, you do not platoon at the DH spot. Too many National League teams, and I've seen this year, too many National League teams are platooning at the DH spot. Because I don't know if they don't pay attention, but yet you have a guy, Billy Eppler, who was on the Angels, who knows that a DH shouldn't be a platoon. You know what? Bad teams platoon the DH, not a good team. And I think Billy Eppler failed there. I think it's unfortunate. I think it's stupid the way Billy Eppler went about the trade deadline. Maybe I would have been more excited about the deadline if the Mets would have went more about the bullpen. And if you wanted to get Daniel Ruff and Vogelback, but you did what you had to do in the bullpen, bringing a Chafin in, bringing a Fulmer in, bringing a Robinson or Iglesias, 1 or 2 pitchers in the bullpen, I think I would have been okay with the trade deadline. Yeah, Eppler had a horrible trade deadline. Now again, in the postseason, Givens might be our best bullpen arm other than Diaz. Vogelback and Ruff might be killing it in the postseason. And then we'll have a different tune about Eppler's trade deadline. But before any of them did any damage and the deadline was over on August 2nd, I'm still not going to say that Eppler. I think if Givens, Vogelback, and Ruff performed great in the postseason, I still think it was still bad trades because I don't like to backtrack and saying that it was a good thing. Just like I ate dirt about Jeff McNeil. I ate dirt about Edwin Diaz. I didn't backtrack on saying, oh, he's great. I don't know what you guys talk about. I didn't say that. No, I'm going to still say that Eppler got lucky that those guys performed well, not because they're good players, because Givens, Ruff, and Vogelback are not good players. They're serviceable enough to be in the big leagues, at least. That's the whole point. So, with that said, guys, I will see you tomorrow. Live streaming Tuesday's game against the Pirates. Now, because of the rain delay, it's game 1. And I will beat you with the first game of, maybe I'll do both games. We'll see. I will see you tomorrow night for Mets Pirates. I will see you for game 1, Mets Pirates. And I will see how I feel for game 2 on Wednesday. So with that said, guys, keep your heads up, guys. Still be confident in this team. Last I checked, the Mets are 85 and 50. 35 games over 500. They still have a 1-game lead. Technically 2, considering the fact that the Braves can't tie the Mets in overall record. Because the Mets only need to take 1 game in that 3-game series to have a better season series. So with that said, guys, be confident. Don't be cocky. And don't, too many Mets fans are thinking that the Mets are going to collapse. Still not a collapse. The Braves can win the division without the Mets collapsing. So be confident. The Mets need to show up. They need to play Mets baseball, pitch well like they have been doing, and continuing to do their job. You should beat the Pirates at the very least 2 out of 3. But go out there acting like this team is the freaking Dodgers. Because what they did against the National Series is they looked like a team that walked onto the field and thinking they were going to win just because. Go into that Pittsburgh series like that game is dependent on a World Series championship or making the playoffs. Do it like that. That's what they need to do. They need to be focused. I want to see better at bats. This offense can do a lot of damage. The Pirates ain't throwing anybody special out there. You got to beat them. Get the job done. 2 out of 3 probably guarantees you first place by the end of the week. At the very least, tied, maybe. Because the Braves are going on the West Coast. That's not an easy trip in September. They're playing Seattle, who's been one of the better teams in baseball, and the Giants for 4 games, which the Giants aren't a really good team, but they're a team that perform well at home. It's not going to be easy for the Braves on a West Coast trip. That's a long trip. Long trip in September. So this is the opportunity for the Mets with 27 games to go to do their damn job. They do their job, the Braves ain't winning this division. So with that said, guys, and yes, thank you, Paris. Thank you. The Braves still got the Phillies, who are still trying to keep their wild card spot. 7 more games. So those games are not going to be easy either. So they got a long West Coast trip, plus the Phillies 7 more times. That's not easy for the Braves. Not thinking that the Braves are going to fall apart, but I think the Braves, sooner or later, they're going to get hit in the mountain probably. And I think it's going to be on this West Coast trip. Again, the Mets can perform bad over the next week, and it still might be a 1-game lead. But with that said, guys, I'll see you tomorrow night for Mets versus Pirates. Game 1. Stay confident, Mets fans. We still got a 1-game lead. We're still in the driver's seat. Even if the Braves play well, even if they could take over the division, the season's not over yet. The Mets are going to make the playoffs. The Mets are a really good team. They're one of the best teams in baseball. Be confident, Met fans. We are still in first place, and it's not over until the fat lady sings. Have a good day, guys. Have a good Labor Day. Stay safe. Let's go, Mets. See you next time. See you tomorrow. I'm out.